UBC's chapter of Psychi acknowledges that it operates on UBC's infrastructure, which is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. Please appreciate the meaning behind the statement as we move forward with the Labyrinth podcast.
Welcome to the Labyrinth podcast. Thousands of students, less than 100 labs. How do you find your way around the maze of research opportunities? We are UBC Psychi, and this podcast serves as a one-way route to everything you need to hear about UBC psychology labs. We invite principal investigators and lab members to encourage, educate, and inform students about research opportunities in psychology. My name is Abhi, and I'm the co-president of Psychi. Today, we are very lucky to have Dr. Joelle LeMoult from the Depression, Anxiety, and Stress Lab. I'm particularly very excited to be here today because I'm also a research assistant at the same lab, so this will be a fun conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. So how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited about this.
Fun. Me too. Very excited to be here. And for everyone listening, can you please introduce yourself further about your involvement at UBC?
Yeah, so as you said, Abby, my name is Dr. Joelle LeMoult. I am an assistant professor here at UBC. I came here just over 5 years ago now, and have been the PI of the Depression, Anxiety, and Stress Lab ever since.
Wow, so this lab has been running for 5 years. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's not very old, to be honest. 5 years. So much has happened.
Yeah, we started in September 2020, so I guess almost 6. It's almost time for it. We're like 5.5 years old, I guess.
All right, perfect. So the 5 years in this lab, and then can you please tell us about the general research focus that the DAS lab is conducting?
Yeah, so in general, we really focus on understanding depression and anxiety disorders. And in particular, I've always been really curious about kind of how the onset, how they present, and then how the courses, so how they unfold over time.
Indeed, when I first wanted to become a research assistant, I went to the website and I was looking and I was like, oh, depression, anxiety is exactly what I haven't taken up normal psychology yet, fast forward to now, but I really want to learn more about this even before taking it in a course. So very exciting, very exciting. And the name is the DAS lab, as I said earlier, Depression, Anxiety, and Stress. So how are these three words connected to what the lab studies? Basically, a continuation from the last question. How did the name of this lab come about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, although I didn't talk in my last answer about the stress part of it, the stress part of my lab is actually really important and sort of is the core, I think, of what kind of holds everything together. Because I'm really curious about this idea that some people respond to stress in ways that are really healthy and lead to psychological well-being, whereas others respond to stress in ways or just stress happens and it leads to them being more likely to develop depression and anxiety disorders. And so in my mind, stress is a key part of understanding depression and anxiety. There are different types of stress that people experience, or there are different ways of responding to stress, whatever it is, but we know that stress matters a lot. And so, yeah, we really try to understand why is it that some people develop depression and anxiety in response to stress, whereas others are really resilient. Is it about the type of stress? Is it about the amount of stress? Or is it about kind of coping skills that we could give people that would ultimately help them?
Yeah, it's a big question. I love the stress part because that's the root of the problem, right? Whether that happens in your early life or later on. As you said, why do some people develop depression and anxiety, and why are some very resilient and they grow from it? If you can answer that question, then it's solving the problem, basically, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the really kind of big thing that motivates us day to day is really trying to understand that problem so that we can identify kind of who is at greatest risk when stress happens. How do we help people most in order to foster resilience? And I think that that's so key because it informs prevention work, it informs treatment. And I think for me and for a lot of us in the lab, I think the ultimate goal is to sort of do what we can in order to inform how we would make lives on a day-to-day basis better for individuals.
So you're hearing that, everyone? If you want to make people's lives better, contribute to the research of the DAS lab. That's exactly what you got to do. That's the crux of clinical psychology right there.
Changing the world every day. I wish.
And like that that's also interesting. So like, what motivated you? I don't know whether it's in your undergraduate years or in your graduate, or maybe what motivated you to be in this area of study and to get into this area of study.
Yeah, that's I think that's a really good, very maybe surprising. I have a surprising answer to that question, I should say. So I was actually an economics major in undergrad.
Oh, wow.
and I know and afterwards I worked in business, and I was actually doing research because I thought I wanted to go to grad school for economics. So I was working full time after I graduated in an economics lab. And we happened to collaborate with some folks in the psychology department. We were really interested in behavioral economics. And I mean, I still love economics and I love understanding kind of how people make the economic decisions that they do. But I think I realized that a big part for me that was missing was not just understanding why people do what they do, but then how do we apply that information to actually make a difference and, make things a little bit easier for them. As I said, changing the world. But on a serious note, how is it that could I do that same research to understand, why is it people that people do what they do, and then use that to, make their distress a little bit less, or increase their well-being. And so, after that collaboration, I was sold, and I went back and I got a postbac degree in psychology, and the rest is history.
So a postbac degree in psychology, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I mean, I had not really taken any psych classes. Well, I took one psych class my entire undergraduate degree. And so, I had to go back and I took a bunch of undergraduate classes as a postbac student and got a second degree as an undergraduate in psychology, which you need in order to go to graduate school in psychology. It turns out they're not just letting people in.
Tell me about it.
And so I think I also wanted to make sure that I wasn't changing careers on complete whim. So I went back, I took a bunch of undergraduate classes, and the more classes I took on like motivation and clinical psych and classes like that, the more I just loved it. And I realized that everything I'd loved about economics, understanding why people make decisions or how they respond to things, I loved the research part, but I was able to apply that in a way that, made me feel good on a day-to-day basis.
That is a crazy journey. So,
I know.
There's always this stress today that I hear from all my friends and other psychology students being like, oh, I'm getting a degree in psychology. I got to graduate. I got to go to grad school. Like, there's this race. And now hearing this, I'm like, there's no race. You can get a degree in anything else. They get another degree in psychology. Then you can become a clinical psychologist whenever. Don't worry about it. There's time. Time is not flying away.
I think it's so true. And in all honesty, I think my, kind of roundabout path to get here made me all the more sure that when I got here, I was able to do what I really loved and wanted to do. I think, yeah, I mean, I worked for several years in investment banking and strategy and management consulting after graduation, and then went back to research. And so, yeah, I've done lots of different things. And so I think because of that, I really knew when I found what fit for me. And there was no rush to get there.
Yeah, it's very important. I constantly also find myself, I think like what's important just to be aware to what brings your energy up and what brings your energy down. Never to always like put yourself on this predetermined path, because what if you, I remember actually, for everyone who's not listening, Edwina, who was the previous lab manager at the Depression, Anxiety, and Stress Lab, she gave me this advice and she told me that what if you get there and then you don't enjoy it? You've been working for just one thing your entire like life and then you just don't enjoy it. So just like see what brings your energy up, what brings your energy down, and like explore this. You never know who you meet and where you end up. It's really,
That's such great advice. I agree. I think you really need to pay attention. I think it's a huge leap of faith, right? To sort of be willing to change gears and pay attention to that kind of internal marker of, yeah, what gets my energy up today, what doesn't, and then make decisions based on it.
yeah, exactly. And so after that crazy journey 5 years ago, how did the Depression, Anxiety, and Stress Lab start in UBC? What's the
Yeah,
origin
so
story?
I was I was finishing up my postdoc. So after grad school, I went and I did a postdoc, and I was finishing up my postdoc and applying for research jobs. And I loved UBC. I loved Vancouver. I felt like our department was really amazing because it's so collaborative, and Vancouver is not a shabby place to live. And so yeah, I was fortunate to get a job here, which is wonderful. And I feel like I able to combine, for me, most of my research had focused on depression and stress historically, but most of my clinical work had focused on anxiety. And so to me, the DAS lab to focus on depression, anxiety, and stress was my way of sort of bringing these two different worlds together more formally. I started it off with one graduate student and 2 research assistants, and we have grown since then.
Oh, wow. Definitely. That's great to hear. Wow. Wow. Yeah, what a way to combine all your interests into like one place. And you have the freedom and the knowledge to do that. That's great.
Yeah, I think that's the really fun part about academia, actually, is that you kind of get to be your very own boss, right? Like I get to choose what I want to focus on, and I get to, kind of choose what is it that I'm really passionate about, and then follow that passion, which I feel like there aren't that many jobs that you get to do that.
True, definitely, indeed. I guess that's the thinking is like the benefit of being, getting that doctorate and, having your lab or being a professor, plus also being clinician. You have that like every day is kind of like a different day. You get to do so many things. It's not just 9 to 5. You go to one job, you have a boss, then you go back home. Yeah. So
Yeah, I love that. I love that I get to wear those many hats, right? Like I get to be a mentor, I get to be a researcher, I get to be a teacher, I get to, be a writer, I get to be a statistician. So I get to do so many different things in the context of this one job.
That's amazing. It's really good and very insightful. And so you started off with 2 research assistants. Now, how many is there now? 15?
I think there is I think the last count was around 17 or 18. But our lab has grown a lot. I think in a great way. So we now
it is
have...
also one of the bigger labs generally that I've seen in the department. So from 2 to 17. What's the extent of involvement for all the undergraduate research assistants, such as what tasks and skills do RAs generally get out of the experience from what you've seen, from 2 research assistants all the way to now What are some success stories and skills that you've seen RAs being involved in?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we really think a lot about in our lab is what kinds of experiences do we want to give RAs? What kinds of experiences would they benefit from if they're thinking about going into research? If they're thinking about going into kind of clinical work, if they're thinking about some of our RAs will go into medicine, even law. So we get a huge variety of kind of paths that people pursue next. And because of that variety, we, as much as possible, make the training experience fit the individual. So because it's such a big lab, one can imagine there's a risk that someone could feel like sort of like one of many, I think, in the lab and not get that personal attention. And so we have a mentorship model where each undergraduate is paired with a graduate student or postdoc who gets to know them, their goals, the skill sets they have, the skill sets they want to develop, and works, kind of with me, talks about it as a team, like with all of the supervisors. We kind of as a team come up with a training opportunities that would really benefit that person. And so those training opportunities can be very varied. And we've had some people who know they want to go to med school, say, and thus develop more in-depth knowledge of the psychophysiology equipment that we use, or of cortisol and the neuroendocrine system, because that feels really relevant to the skills they're going to build on in med school, and also the skills that they want to be able to speak to on med school applications. And so, that might be one path. Another path is someone who knows they want to go to kind of more of a clinical or counseling route after this. And so we offer training opportunities in clinical interviewing skills and phone screen training, where they're able to get better acquainted with DSM criteria, as you have, Abhi, and work towards like developing those interviewing skills to build on themselves in grad school. Similarly, things like crisis response to crisis, like suicide awareness and self-harm awareness, and steps they would need to take in order to respond to crisis situations. That's also part of the training they'll receive. And then there's also people who know that they sort of want more of the kind of more traditional research experiences and path. And so many of our RAs, if they've been there long enough and they've really shown initiative in terms of statistics and generating research ideas, will participate in conference presentations, either locally at UBC or kind of at national or international conferences. So lots of different things. And on a day-to-day basis, they also learn kind of the fundamentals of running a research study. So everything from lit searches that inform methodology to, managing participants and managing data. There's lots of different parts that go into research. And
perfect,
so, yeah.
Thank you for such a comprehensive answer. I can definitely speak to that, because what's great is the not everyone has the same path being a research assistant in the lab. Everyone's skills and tasks are tailored to what their goals are and what they need. And I love the mentorship. I can speak to it because I'm going through the exact same process that you're talking about. I love it that, it's just 3 people, or I had one-on-one meetings with Ashley, who is a graduate student, who is my mentor. She would ask me, so what are your goals? One-on-one meetings. What are your goals? What do you want to learn? And based on that, everyone thinks about how they can help each research assistant do what they want to learn and get out of what they want to get out of from the experience. And I'm very grateful for that personally as a research assistant in the lab. Many people say, oh, I'm part of 2 labs, because you learn something in one lab and you learn something else in another lab. And for me, it's like, I feel I don't need to be a part of 2 labs, because so many of the tasks. I've done so many tasks, and there's so many more tasks that I can learn from just one lab, that I don't need to be in another lab unless there's specifically research that I'm interested in. That's really awesome to hear. Oh, and yes,
Oh,
fun
that's very
fact,
nice.
the clinical interviewing, I'm saying that's a unique selling point from this lab. If everyone's hearing, you don't get that experience for phone screen training and clinical interviewing everywhere you go. So those in clinical, interest in clinical and counseling psychology, definitely look this lab up on in the department. Yeah.
Thanks, Abby. Yeah, we really try. I think that that's an important goal for us is we really want to be aware of where people want to end up and help them get there.
That's beautiful to hear. That's beautiful to. I'm just like, I'm gonna stay in this lab. I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna.
We
Uh,
keep you busy enough, huh?
yeah, exactly. So all good. And so this brings me back to now. I've been in this lab for a year, or maybe approaching a year.
Yeah,
But
about.
it was, and so now I don't have the question anymore as a student of how do I become a research assistant. But I've heard this question so many times. There was on orientation day, there was a Reddit Ask Me Anything, and I was participating, and so many people would ask, how do you get your foot in the door? I have no research experience. What do I do? Websites don't show anything about hiring. And I remember my journey of just like mass emailing everyone, every lab that I was interested in. So tell me, from the principal investigator, how do you get the initial foot in the door? What would you say is the best thing to do in the situation where, as a student, you have no previous research experience and you don't know where to start? What can you do about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question and one I get asked a lot as well. I think that that's especially been challenging during COVID, right? So I think that there are fewer and fewer labs that are hiring. I know at least for us, we've slowed down the number of volunteers we've accepted in the last year. And I think I really feel for students right now. And Abby, I think your approach is the one that's most often successful. It's like, the most number of emails or to different websites. I know for us, we have an application form online, which that we really do. So even if we very rarely put out calls for new research assistants because we have so many people who fill out that application form online through our website. When we do need to fill a position, we go to people who have taken the time to fill out that application form. We actually don't really often prioritize people who have previous research experience. We're really interested in looking for people who have shown responsibility, whether that's in research or outside of it. It could be because of the jobs you've held, because of a sport you played, an instrument you played. But I think that there's a lot of ways to show accountability and hard work and trustworthiness. And I think that honestly, in our lab, that those are some of the most important skill sets to demonstrate. And a lot of the times that actually came from outside of research, even amongst those who have research experience. So I don't think that a lack of research experience should be, should make you worried. I think that apply to a lot of places because in a large part, it is a numbers game. There's just, I think, not enough opportunities out there, and so the more labs that you apply to, the more likely you are that's going to find a lab that's looking for a research assistant. And I find also there are kind of specific times where labs have more turnover that could be helpful for students to know. For example, like at the beginning of the summer or in between terms, that's a time when there's a little bit more turnover, right? Like a lot of our RAs this year are leaving to go on to graduate school or other kind of like next step opportunities. And so we're going to be looking to hire, kind of around the beginning of the summer once again. Yeah. So I think that that's something that can be helpful for people to know, is that there are points where transitions are more likely, and that those would be often the best times to look for positions.
Indeed. I wanted to share my story actually. When I invited you to this podcast, I was like, this is a moment to share my story. We can make this more conversational. It was, so the cold calling process that I did, I emailed, it's the same as applying to jobs, after you graduate from university, you apply to like 80 to 100 jobs.
Yeah.
You get the majority of them just ignore you. You may get a reply from 5 of them, an interview from 2, and you get accepted to 1. So it is a numbers game. And similarly, the first time I applied, there were 2 times I applied to the DAS lab. The first time I applied, I just got an email saying we're not looking for anyone. Nothing. I don't know if I got that email or if I just got no email at all. But then the second time was actually on a Psych-Hi event. It was the high school tour that we took. So I was taking high school students on tour, and one of them was the DAS lab. And I remember, so I asked, I was like, hey guys, I got rejected the last time. Are you guys hiring again? I want to apply again. And that was perfect because I remember Taylin, who at that time was presenting, she said that we're hiring right now. So I immediately after that event, I went back home and I went to the application form and I applied, and then interview with Ashley, and now I'm here. So great. Good story.
I still remember when you started. Yes, it was, and it's somewhat about like the kind of luck of time, right? So be persistent. I feel like that's like the secret to academia, or maybe life in general. Just persistent.
Yeah, never self-reject yourself. Never self-reject yourself. Previous research experience doesn't matter, as long as you show responsibility, curiosity, and hard work. And the hiring cycles, beginning of summer or the beginning of the winter terms, around September or January maybe. Great. Wow, this is so productive. I'm so glad that this idea is happening. Like so happy. I'm so happy right now. Good stuff. So we were talking about that, the sort of application was, so is there a difference, would you say, that between, so you talked about students who have no previous research experience, you're looking for that drive or the responsibility, that are they responsible, are they willing to learn? Now, what are you looking for, let's say, in a research assistant that has a lot of experience? Does it become more competitive in that way, or
that's a good question. Yeah. I mean, I think the same thing. I think, I mean, the skills that you're talking about, I think are so important and are exactly the ones to think about, which is the idea of, really, I love the idea. Willing to learn is a huge one because, in a lot of what we do, it's about constantly learning new things. And I think the trustworthy and responsible part is important in our lab in particular, because we do work with a lot of confidential information and very clinically sensitive information. I mean, every lab works with confidential information, but for us, it's a lot of very clinically sensitive. And so that's really critical. And I think that it's about, also for different ways too. And sometimes that can come from your own life experiences, or places you've lived, or cultures you're from, but it also can come from a diversity of experiences in the research that you've worked previously. So I think that one thing that's important if you are applying and you've had previous research experiences is being ready to talk about them in a way that shows what you've learned from them, and kind of how you can incorporate that knowledge to add to the things that we're doing in our lab. I think that that's a really important piece as well.
Precisely. Good to know. Yeah, I guess transferability, correct? Very important. I mean, in every resume, every job you're applying, anything you're applying to, how did your previous skills help you, be where you are today, and how can they take you forward? That's very important to keep in mind,
Yeah.
indeed. And so yeah, you gave a little sneak peek. I don't know if students caught on it or when the lab is hiring, but let's talk about it a little bit further. So as you said, due to COVID-19,
Yeah.
many labs have stopped looking for research assistants due to the huge transition. So, first, how do you look at the situation? Would you say grad school would be more lenient because of what happened? Or do you think it's just a matter of keeping up to the race when everything gets back to normal eventually? How do you
Well,
look at the situation for students?
yeah, you mean like for students applying for grad school?
Mm-hmm. Students applying
Mm,
to grad school, students just trying to like get the ball rolling in their lives, not just doing online classes every day, but to be involved. Many students have not even come to UBC for first year. um, so um, so how
yeah,
do you see the situation for them? Hmm.
I think that's a great question. Honestly, I think that there'll be a lot of variability in how people in labs and kind of what schools expect. Um, I think that on one hand, I think I could see, yeah, that maybe there'll be sort of a kind of a more reasonable expectations, knowing how much students have had to overcome and face in the last year. It's not been an easy year for students. Um, on the other hand, I'm also aware that the number of applications, at least that UBC received for grad school prospective students, is higher than ever.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, I do think it's a challenge. I think that if we could sort of go back to a point you emphasized earlier when we talked a little bit about my story, is that I think that one trend that I've noticed
Hmm.
in the kind of field in terms of who's applying for grad school and things like that is that more and more people are taking some time after graduation to get additional research experience. And my guess is that's going to be true even more now after COVID, because maybe they couldn't get as many opportunities. And that's something that's actually what had been the norm in other places. Like I come from the US, and in the US, it was really unusual to go right from undergrad into grad school, even if you had chosen the right major. Um, but I think that that's sort of more and more the norm here. And I think that I hope that that actually takes a little bit of the pressure off of students, so that it really encourages students to be able to explore more during undergraduate years, different labs or different experiences, not have that pressure to kind of do everything I needed to do during my 4 years of university,
Hmm.
especially when one of them was probably, less than ideal because it was in the middle of COVID. And instead to be willing to take a couple of years afterwards and maybe work full time or work part time as a research assistant in a lab, maybe a lab manager or a study coordinator or something like that. Um, at least for clinical, I think that that's becoming more and more the norm that I see amongst the students who are applying. And I think that COVID will push that trend even more so.
Right. I'm a huge fan of that trend because, um, generally in my history or my parents, and I'm sure also many students I have friends, we feel this pressure that we must get into grad school right after undergrad so we can just finish our education first as soon as possible, and then start our real job. But like, why, right? Why? That doesn't have to be the path. um you don't have to, it doesn't have to be step by step, finish your education, get all your degrees, then start your job. It can, and your story is a great example of it. It doesn't have to be the traditional way.
Yeah, it's the journey, not the destination, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it really is. I think that that's sort of it. It's a shift. I know for a lot of people, really, actually, the couple of years they might take after graduating, where they're working full time, they learn more in those 2 years, and that's a sort of a paid part of their education, that actually really sets them up know for sure what kind of grad school they want to go into, and also really actually sets them up to be more successful in grad school, because you just learn so much about research when you're doing it full time that I think we're realizing more and more now is just um, really valuable. And we're seeing that people who've taken the time to do that are able to hit the ground running in grad school in a way that others aren't. And so might actually do grad school in a fewer number of years, might be more productive in grad school because they're able to have kind of developed more of those foundational skills before it starts.
For sure. I was also making this joke with someone else earlier. I was like, just imagine get into the best counseling psychology or clinical psychology program straight under undergrad. So then you graduate and let's say you have a PhD when you're 28 years old or 27 years old. You've done everything fast track. And the joke was like, yeah, but who wants to talk to you about like your life problems and your stressors to a 27-year-old? Where's the experience, right?
I love it.
So yeah, indeed, experience, take your time. You learn so much, not just from degrees, but also from just years of experience, correct?
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
And so we're slowly wrapping up our time, and I want to go back to being a researcher in general.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no, wait. First, we'll end with that. First,
Okay.
yeah, I said earlier, a little sneak peek. So is the DAS Lab looking to hire anytime soon based on COVID? What does it look like for students who are interested in the research?
Perfect timing, Abhi, because we just talked about that this morning with the grad students and study coordinators. And we will be hiring some folks this summer. And then for sure, we will be hiring more people at the start of winter winter one in the fall. So the winter term, like around September. But yeah, even before then, a couple people were just saying that they're amazing research assistants were going on to grad school and other opportunities. And so there will be probably a couple of positions that we are going to fill sooner than later in the summer, and then more in the fall.
Perfect. Okay, fall and summer. So it's starting life. The life is starting, going back to normal. People are getting the opportunities. Exciting stuff. Perfect.
Yes, your big study, Abhi, that you've been working on will hopefully be starting in person again in the fall. Fingers crossed.
Oh, definitely. I really hope so. I also have like many ideas. Well, we can talk about this later. But I also have many ideas for RDoc and stuff like that we can talk about.
I know. I've heard you've been doing a lot of amazing research about it.
And so lastly, so being a researcher, what do you love about being a researcher?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to what I was saying before. I think my very favorite thing as a researcher is that, it's so hard to choose one, but I think I love the idea that I can wear, especially as a clinical psychologist, so many different hats.
Okay.
I love the chance to mentor students and help them reach their goals. Like, I find that so fulfilling and rewarding. I love being able to teach. I think that that's like the most exciting thing one can do. I get to teach abnormal psych, which is to me like this amazing opportunity to get people excited about clinical psychology, for many of them for the first time. And I find that really inspiring. I love being able to do research, and in particular research that I think can be applied towards making people's lives better. And then I love that I also can continue, which I have on and off throughout my life, have a private practice and see clients. So I think it's just this amazing job where I get to do so many different fun things and work with students who I find so inspiring. I feel really lucky. It's pretty cool.
That's perfect. That's really interesting to hear. I love the many hats part. It makes being a researcher makes job diversity really interesting. I was, you never know what you may be doing on any other day, or what is you're seeing new students, mentoring new people. I can imagine it must be very satisfying.
Yeah. And I find that students are just so excited and enthusiastic, and I really feed off of their excitement, and it makes me all the more excited about my job.
Perfect. So glad to hear that. And with that, I think that wraps up the time. If we continue further, I don't think anyone's going to listen. They're going to stop listening.
If
We
you've made
gotta.
it here, I feel like I should like give them some sort of like
That's
really gold
true.
nugget.
Exactly. Like
Secret to
you have to
life.
capture the attention span, right? Yeah.
Well, thank you, Abhi. This was so much fun to be a part of. What a great idea that you're doing.
And thank you so much for being a part of this project. I think this has been a really good talk, and we are trying to, like, instead of making it very interview formal, like, we are trying to make it more conversational. And I'm really glad that you were a part of this and part of it very early on. And I'm sure everyone has a lot of interesting things to take out from this conversation. And that wraps up this episode of the Labyrinth podcast. So thank you everyone for listening. Please, we're going to keep uploading from now also till the summer with different principal investigators from different labs. It's not over. This is just the beginning. Please find us on Instagram, on Facebook to find out more about where we'll be uploading our episodes. We'll upload them on Spotify, on YouTube. More information about that later. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.